Hi, I'm Andy LeGrand, and you're listening to the very first episode of Knox Guitar Box. Knox Guitar Box is a production of Knoxville Classical Guitar, a 501c3 nonprofit organization that supports local and regional guitarists and students through performance, production, education, service, and community. For more information or to offer support for Knoxville Classical Guitar, visit knoxvilleclassicalguitar.com. Today, we've released 2 episodes. A conversation with Goran Ivanovic, and a second episode featuring music presented by Ben Kreider, a young guitarist from Knoxville, Tennessee, in Knoxville Classical Guitar's first ever Rising Guitarist Showcase. I'm excited as Goran joins me in this episode for a wonderful conversation about his music projects, compositions, and life. Goran, I'm glad you're here.
Oh man, I get to break the ice with you. That's fun. No better way to start with other than me, the bad boy of classical guitar playing.
Oh, no. You are not a bad boy. That's one of the reasons I wanted to start with you is because I don't think you're a bad boy at all. I believe you're pushing things ahead. You're always innovative with your music, and I think it's fantastic. I was chatting with a student this morning, and I told him that I'd be talking with you tonight, and he was like, "Really? All right." So he knew who you were.
Man.
Yeah. So not so bad.
Not so bad. I'll take that. I'll take that.
So listen, I did a lot of reading this week because we've been so disconnected, everyone, and there's so much stuff coming at us. Even our main streams of information are cluttered. I knew you had put out an album earlier this year, and I believe this is correct. It's the new album Indo-Balkan, correct?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, all right. Can you tell me a little bit about the album, the project?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you mentioned the title. The title Indo-Balkan comes from, this is about a year before we even went to the studio and started recording. My duo partner, Farid Haq, who is a great guitarist, great composer. We've been playing on and off for 20 years. So especially in the last 3 years, we started playing more and more together, and we started, getting back to the, same old relationship that we had 20 years ago, but it obviously changed because I'm older, he's older, and we have different experiences in music. So I told him, we started playing back together live shows, and this was all going really well. And he said, let's do another record. And I said, yes, but this time you have to come up with a lot of tunes. You have to write your best stuff. And I'm always writing, so I always have something in my closet to bring to the table. But I really pushed him to write something specifically for the duo. He's a prolific writer, and he's played with so many jazz and classical greats, and so he has very particular work ethic. And I remember, we had a conversation after a gig, and I was like, "Hey, listen, if you want this duo to keep going, and you want us to keep growing and progressing together, you have to write something." And I remember, we had a couple drinks, and I went to bed, and he knocks on my hotel room like 6 a.m.
We're listening to Indo-Balkan by Farid Haq and Goran Ivanovic.
called In the Balkan. We should practice it right now. And I was like, hey, listen, man, we have a whole day off. Why 6 in the morning? Let me sleep. So he did let me sleep for a couple hours, and then he was like, let's learn this. And I was like, well, this is really awesome tune. The reason why I liked it, it had this whole Balkan rhythms that I'm so familiar with, and I've studied them and practiced them. And then he combined that with a lot of Indian music, so that the melodic line is usually over 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 bars. It's a much longer feel. He brought the tune, and it was all written out. He didn't sleep 1 hour, and he was like,
wow.
This is a great tune, and it's going to showcase what you can do really well, and my writing and Indian meters and the Balkan feels.
How did you, if he wrote that piece, did he write it for both of you guys, or did you kind of just come in and say, hey, I'm going to do this, let's do this on top of it?
I mean, again, he's the kind of person that works really great under pressure, and that's why he's played with Sting and Dizzy Gillespie and Joe Zawinul and Nigel Kennedy and all these people. He's really great under fire, and again, I think he wrote all the parts throughout the night, didn't sleep like an hour, and then he presented them to me. Okay. And I remember I was just trying to understand what the thought process was on the song and how long it should be, just to get an overall feel for the song before I start changing his ideas or direction. So I was like, listen, show me the feel of the main melody that comes into like one minute, from the beginning. And we worked really hard on that, and I was trying, playing an octave lower, octave higher, combining different notes, adding bass lines, adding counterpoint. And I basically stuck to the original. It was simple. It made sense. I also think, a common thing that we do is we play with a range, and that's something new that was introduced in this album that we thought about a lot, is let's not place, in unison a lot. Let's try to do a lot of things that are in different ranges of the guitar that we can make the sound even bigger, right? Yeah. We were just doing a lot of trying out of, different chords and different voicings. And, there is nothing but, that first gig that you play the song and you're like, hey, everybody, we have a brand new song and you're the first people listening to this. And then you're like, oh God, help me, there is so many different sections. But this is really where your stew starts to cook, the first, second, third, fourth, fifth gig. And then you can talk about tweaking things here and there and maybe doubling, this section, use this section at the outro and stuff like that mostly everybody does.
Did you begin to work together and write a lot of the pieces on that album?
We have, definitely. I usually store my ideas, very simply on GarageBand and iPhone. Mm-hmm. iPhone's been fun because, I have this little device. It's like a Shure microphone that I stick to my iPhone and makes the sound a little more, natural. So I've been using that, and I store daily ideas from improvised feels early in the morning to something that I worked a couple days ago, never got anywhere. Let me try to refine this. Let me see if this can be another fit to a certain song that we're working on. So I store my ideas, and then when we get together, I'm usually like, hey, listen to this. I think we could use this kind of song in the live setting if we're playing. I think people would enjoy this. This is the kind of song we never really worked on in such a different way. Right. So I would introduce it, and I usually ask my duo partners, here are 3-4 ideas that I already have. Which one do you like the most? And can we try to arrange it on the spot and, work at it? So usually we just record everything that's happening, maybe an hour of rehearsal or 30 minutes. We go home and come up with different parts. That's been the best, most organic way, because guitar, when you write everything down on finale and then it sounds great, it's a full sound, but guitar sounds so different in different registers. So we really have to rely on the instrument and our own capabilities, because I'm not very good at a lot of things. So I try to use and reuse things that I'm really good at. And I think that's mostly how serious arrangers, composers do with things, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, well, when you say you're not good at a lot of things, I don't agree with you. I don't know if you remember, but I actually took an online lesson with you once.
I remember that.
Yeah,
we
okay,
worked,
yeah.
You wrote a piece, it was in the key of D minor or D major. And
Yeah.
I remember.
Okay. I'm going to mention two other tracks off that album, off of Indo-Balkan.
Yeah.
And I'm going to try to pronounce these. Rhodes.
Yep.
Okay. And then, is it Sevda?
Sevdah, yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Yep.
I really enjoy those tracks. I actually enjoy all of them, but those are kind of a go-to for me.
Rhodes is a tune that I wrote maybe like 2-3 years ago. I was coming up with long melodic lines. I was just singing, you know, on the changes that I was coming up with. And it was this like bass line chord type of thing that I found to be sounding kind of neat. And then in the third measure, I decided to change the keys completely. And then the melody just kind of followed that. So I was just kind of like humming that idea.
We're listening to Rhodes by Goran Ivanovic and Farid Hawk.
So, it kind of has that, it could be a bossa nova, but it's also like a very classical phrase type of piece.
Yeah.
So at first I just had chords, and I was trying to find nice melodies just by humming it and trying to find something that would, sound catchy to me,
Yeah.
I think I brought it to Farid, and he was like, "Oh, great! I can play the melody on the D string mostly, and it's going to have this, fat cello-like sound. Another very enjoyable situation, working out something, and at the end of the process, you're like, yeah, it sounds completely different. I envisioned that, but it's a lot of times it's." This is what you got,
Yeah.
I can only sound the best I can, when I listen to other recordings, I'm like, God, how do they do that? I can't do that.
Indo-Balkan, I've listened to it on Amazon Music. I've listened to it on Spotify. If somebody wanted to buy your CD, where would they buy that? Actually get the physical copy?
Amazon is probably the quickest, best, but also the label Delmark. Historic label out of Chicago, Delmark.com. They ship it pretty fast, maybe faster than Amazon, and they make a little more money. So check it out at Delmark.com.
So I also want to chat with you about some of your other projects. I actually met you in person here when we had a house concert. You came and you did a concert. I think you were on your way through to somewhere, and you did a concert here. It's fantastic. A lot of folks from Knoxville Classical Guitar were there in the living room when you played. A friend of mine hosted the concert, but I don't know that I really knew your music as much as I thought I did. So when you came and played, I was like, holy smokes, I love this stuff. But then you had these albums there, and one of them was the AKGI Duo album.
Yeah, we did too.
It was the latter album. Okay. Yeah. So, and Shadow Thief is by far my favorite. I like them all, but Shadow Thief is my favorite track on the album. We're listening to Shadow Thief by Goran Ivanovic and Andreas Kapsalis.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we worked heavily together for a long, long time. Probably 6, 7, 8 years of non-stop touring, a lot of Europe, Asia, and we were getting quite busy at some point. We met because I really liked his compositions. Andreas had a trio at the time, and I was just a super fan. I really liked their music. I enjoyed the texture and different things that I've never heard before. And I was like, oh, this is really great, and I hope I can work with this guy who is coming from a different, totally different guitaristical perspective. He plays a lot of, today a lot of people do that, but when I met him, there were not quite a few people doing the percussion and the tapping and all the harmonics and all the cool stuff. So I always felt of myself as a very strong melody maker, melody player. When I started seeing him playing in shows, I was like, this guy has the best texture stuff, the best counter rhythms, the best doing things in different positions. I thought he was wonderful. And we started playing a little bit together, and, we would meet up and I would play some High to Villa Lobos for him, and he would play me some arrangements of John Zorn, Astor Piazzolla and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, this is really cool, because it's like, so everything is upside down when you're doing like all these, percussive, tapping kind of things. And I was like, okay, let's try one tune. Let's see what happens. And, he wrote some stuff, and I wrote a couple things. I think one of the first tunes that he wrote like years ago, before we started playing together. So I kind of adapted the melody. I wrote some parts, and, we kind of put that together. And then I came up with the Shadow Thief. I came up with that, the first melody, the intro, and we combined it together with tapping. Sounded really great. People really liked it at the show. Not to toot my own horn, but that was the money maker for us,
Yeah.
I think, to be quite honest with you, we wrote like 3-4 tunes, and we were both in a situation where we were not playing much with other projects. So he booked a tour. We went to Colorado and Arizona, and we played a bunch of shows. We had only maybe like 6-7 tunes, and at the end of the tour, it sounded pretty tight. So that gave us incentive to keep writing more and keep arranging more, and that relationship was very fruitful, very long lasting, and we wrote really, really well together. I think some of the most success I've gotten, and people really loved them. Again, because as far as like the duos and trios, you have the Assads, the best guitar duo of all times, but they, they're two classical guys playing Brazilian music. There's not that much improvisation. They're right. So many other great duos, but not so many great duos that I can think of. Steel string, tapping, percussion, classical, and both writing. I feel like that was one unique thing about that project.
Yeah. It sounds like you guys had a great time doing that. So.
Absolutely, yeah.
Good.
Thanks for asking for that.
Yeah, and then you've also had a trio. I think I've listened to one album of the trio.
There is only one. Only one.
Okay.
But yeah, that was the one, and we did it maybe 3 years ago.
Okay.
There was a different bass player, kind of the first bass player in the band, Matt Hewley, very successful jazz composer, bassist, arranger. And then Pete Tashian, a great young drummer that I've been seeing play in Chicago for many years. And I asked those two guys to be on the record. And then there were some tours and a few dates in Europe, some festivals and stuff. And then COVID hit, and I think our last shows were in January, February, around Chicago, Midwest, and we had quite a lot of successful shows, but since then it's stopped.
I believe it's about 4 years ago, maybe, when you came to Knoxville.
Yeah.
And were you just starting the trio then, or were you just trying to get things going?
I think so. Yeah, I think I was planning to come with a trio to Knoxville, and
that's right. I remember a
couple other dates, and one of the guys couldn't do it, so I didn't want to audition another guy for. And I got to tell you, I never really play solo. I only rarely play solo, and I love it. I'm always like, why am I not doing it more often? Yeah. And then I remind myself how difficult it is. Because you really have to prepare. If I'm playing with a trio and we set the mood for whatever might be happening, drum solo, bass solo, in time, out of time, change keys, there's always something to feed off, and you're like, okay, let those two guys handle the mood right now. Yeah. Take a 5-minute break.
Yeah. Well, you didn't, when you played solo, you didn't make it look like it was too tough for you at all. But, so I'd like to shift gears, if it's okay.
Please.
And talk more about you specifically, because you're a common theme in a lot of successful acoustic projects. There's a backstory that brought you to Chicago. Before we get there, when did you first have a guitar in your hands? How did that happen?
I was probably like 6, 7, and a friend of mine, we lived in the same apartment complex, and he was like 2 years older than me. He was taking guitar for a couple of years, and I would go over and play games, and a game became like, hey, let me teach you a song on the guitar, And my father at that time was a working musician, so I came home and I played a song for him on the guitar, and I've never gotten a lesson before,
Yeah.
And my dad said, like the same day they took me to the music school, and they said, is he old enough to take the guitar? And they said yes, and they did some solfege testing on me right away, and they said, okay, you're accepted at the school, and that was it. Classical from a very early age, but even before my teenage years, I was playing pop tunes and trying to learn chords for pop hits that I was hearing on the radio. So there was always this interest in like, oh, here's a song, and I'm playing these chords, and the chords are right, but it sounds completely different than what the song is. So what do I have to do if I want to impress somebody? Do I have to play the melody too? So I think all these things kind of started shaping early on. I mean, nature of guitar is like, you're playing the melody, bass line, and counterpoint, but to be able to arrange stuff and really start thinking about that process early on was very helpful for me, I think.
Now, where was this when you first started schooling for guitar? Where were you located?
This was in Croatia. I grew up in Osijek, very small, not a very small town. European standards, like 100,000 people. So you had quite a bit of culture. You had music school and music high school and the opera house. And I remember early on checking out all kinds of things. And back then they would send the best people around Europe to represent their countries. So a lot of times I remember, there is a guy from Spain playing classical guitar at the small opera house in Croatia, and the whole class went like, oh my God, when's the next time that somebody's going to come from Spain? So we were all very excited about it, and I think it was very healthy way to approach thinking about music and education. Like everybody else, we fall in love with certain things that we love about the guitar and how it sounds, it can sound, and then that's that.
Yeah. And then you went to college in Salzburg.
Yeah. Okay. I was a very young student when I got admitted to college. I skipped high school. Now looking back, I wish I went to high school and didn't propel that much at early age, because it definitely caught up with me at some point.
So tell me, what allowed you to skip high school? What did that?
Well, I auditioned at Mozarteum in Salzburg, which is, like Juilliard in Europe. It's one of the top schools in Europe. And, there is a lot of very young, talented kids that go to that school.
Okay.
And I think at some point I was playing well and doing well at competitions at age like 11, 12, 13. And, my parents said, let's audition at the Mozarteum through somebody's recommendation. We auditioned, and they accepted me, and that was that. The practicing and all the subjects that I had to take were taking so much time of me that my parents said, there's no way he can go to high school and university basically at the same time. Yeah. So I had to do some, they called it culture classes, where, we would go over different things, but that was minor.
Yeah. So your parents really supported your musical career. Shortly after you came to Chicago. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Sure. I mean, I was just finishing the studies at Salzburg with Elliot Fisk and Joachim Clark. I could have stayed in Austria and done master's degree, but I decided to follow my parents and moved to Chicago, where, I moved in 97. That was a complete culture shock,
Yeah.
It was exciting and fun and tough and everything in between. I think I moved here on a Friday in July, and a week later I was already like looking for gigs and seeing what's out there, and I ended up finding a restaurant where I played for many years. I had like 3 nights in a restaurant playing 3 hours a night, and they'd feed me, and I did that for first couple of years in the States, and it was fun. I bought a car. I was driving around and playing gigs. I was like, well, if this is what life is as a working musician, then great.
And you've been there since then, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I started out playing weddings and restaurant gigs, and at some point I started developing projects, because all this time you're playing in a fondue restaurant, and there is like cheese left and right to you, and your guitar starts smelling like fondue restaurant, and you're like, God, maybe I can come up with a cool project that people will actually come to and enjoy the music.
Yeah.
And half kidding, but there is a lot of truth to that,
Yeah. You've been involved with a school in Chicago for private instruction. And what's the name of the school?
The school is New Music School, which is downtown, Michigan Avenue.
Okay. All right. And how long have you been with them?
I've been with them for about 7-8 years now.
Okay. Wow. Yeah.
This will be the 8th year.
Okay. Do you have students that have tagged along the entire time?
Some of them I started very early on, and I think the oldest student that I have, I've had for maybe like 6 years. Okay. So that feels pretty good.
Yeah.
I've seen kids playing from age 6, and now they're 12, 13, and it's amazing.
To clarify, are you teaching online through any other schools, or just New Music School?
Just the New Music School, and that, to be honest, that's been enough, and that's been good, especially through the lockdown. And I've had a lot of students doing 2 classes a week, so I was just glued on my computer, and it was useful because I already knew them and what they need to get better at. And when we started doing classes over internet, I already knew them as person and what they need to work on, and we just kept learning new repertoire every week, another piece, and I just keep pushing them. And poor kids, they wanted friends, and they get me as a friend.
That's good though, right?
Yeah, positive. I've been writing a collection of pieces. At this point, I call them children's songs, and it's based on just me being really. I enjoy teaching my kids different repertoire and different composers, but I'm always like, I could write something for this kid in particular, and boost their ego a little bit, and be like, hey, I wrote something, I think you could play this really well, and let's see if it works out. So I did it with a couple students, and then I caught the bug, and I was like, I wrote one piece and second piece, and now I wrote like 10 2-minute pieces.
Oh, wow.
That, I really enjoy playing myself, and I have one kid, he's 10 years old, and he's playing one of the pieces, and it's really funny because the kids have to be like so honest with you, and they're like, oh, this part I really love, but this part is just so bad,
Yeah.
And they're so young, they don't really realize the difference of like somebody else wrote it or I wrote it.
Right. Yeah.
Like, why does it matter,
Yeah.
So I've been kind of playing around with that idea, and there's some publishing. A good friend of mine is revising the score, and so I'll publish it with a certain publisher pretty soon.
Well, that's cool. So a little collection has happened out of this last year, really, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I kept writing pieces for the duo and myself, and but I was like, okay, this is a particular project that I'll just do, 3 cycles of six songs each and hope for the best. And at some point I'll realize what they have in common and why it was important for me to do them now. But, just trying to keep things positive and, keep things moving was a great idea,
Yeah, it's really important. Goran and I talked for at least an hour more, and I'm grateful he was able to share with us. You can learn more about Goran Ivanovic at goranguitar.net. If you would like to support Knoxville Classical Guitar and Knox Guitar Box, please visit knoxvilleclassicalguitar.com/podcast. There you will be able to make a single donation or set up monthly donations for any amount. Please know that all donations go directly to Knoxville Classical Guitar. This episode of Knox Guitar Box is sponsored by Francisco Navarro Guitars, handmade classical and flamenco guitars, fine quality craftsmanship, and amazing tone and playability in an affordable instrument. For more information, visit francisconavarroguitars.com. And by Flint Merrill Music, an online marketplace dedicated to music composed and arranged for the guitar. Visit flintmerrillmusic.com for more information. Thank you for listening.